This webinar is provided to you by Colorado Springs Utilities, and we are here to help you be successful with your yard in the Pikes Peak region, as well as create sustainable landscape water use.
Thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to teach this class. I've been doing landscape design classes for Colorado Springs Utilities for about, I think 11 or 12 years now. And this year I wanted to mix it up. So we are doing landscape design in action. Today we're going to do a quick little introduction. I'm going to talk about what to expect because it's going to be different than any other class you've ever seen us do before. We're going to take a look at 3 different scenarios: a small front yard, a large front yard, and then a large corner lot that just has this blank slate and big side that we're going to address. And then we're also going to talk about some additional resources. So where can you find more information and what to do next with your own yard so you can hopefully put some of these things you learned tonight into practice. So this is me. My name is Lisa Pace. I am originally from Minnesota, where we have no irrigation and our landscapes just grow there. So moving on to Colorado, moving on to the west, it was a really interesting change. And horticulture is always something I've loved. I've been doing it since I was about 15 years old. And I went to Colorado State University and got a bachelor's degree in landscape horticulture with a concentration in design and contracting. I also have my master gardener certificate. I'm a certified landscape technician, a certified landscape irrigation auditor, and I've been working in landscaping for almost 25 years now. I worked for 7 years here in town as a landscape designer and contractor before I came over to utilities. I've been here now for 9 years. And before I worked at the local private business, I actually worked up in Vail area and did high-end residential homes. And then I also worked some in Grand Junction and Fort Collins. So I have a good perspective of how things grow across the state. And I have to say, here in Colorado Springs, this is the hardest place to landscape, in my opinion. And all of those places I just mentioned: Minnesota, Grand Junction, Vail, Fort Collins, and here. This is the hardest place. And it has a lot to do with that it changes so much across the city. There's so many different soil types here in town, and our drastic changes in temperature. So I'll use all of my experience from those 25 years and working all over the state to help you hopefully be inspired to take on your own yard. Over the years, I've taught a lot of WaterWise classes. WaterWise landscape design, drought-tolerant landscapes, dry by design, all different aspects, all different ways I've taught it. I've talked about color, texture, form, about right plant, right place, about exposure, knowing your site, all of those things. And what I find is at the end of the class, everybody's like, okay, and now show me what to do. And that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you how to take, how to go beyond some of those introductory kind of concepts and how to look at the site and actually start placing and organizing the space. I'm going to work primarily in perspectives or elevations. Plan views are great for knowing for sure that everything will fit. I've been doing this long enough that I've got a good eye where I can kind of see from a perspective if things are going to stay within that space. So we're going to work elevation and perspective because I think that's what most people understand, and it's easier for people to see how it's going to look at the end with those points of view. I will talk about design concepts, but I'm going to cover them briefly. I'm not going to describe each one. I'm not going to talk about right plant, right place, or soil sun requirements. We're going to go straight to the good stuff. We're going to talk about how I determined and place the plants and why I put them where I put them. The 3 properties we have to review are these 3 right here. The very first one is that one on the left, and it's a home that's been recently updated. And they did a fantastic job. But you can see they already have a retaining wall in there. They tried to do some landscaping. And what they really needed help with is just what plants do I place where. The next one in the middle is kind of a typical home you find here in Colorado Springs, kind of 1970s, 1980s build, where a new homeowner came in, is renovating the place, updating the place, and they want to give the front yard a makeover. This is a little bit bigger of a front yard, but still something that a lot of you can probably relate to. And then the last house we're going to talk about is actually a brand new build way on the east side of town. And then with this house, we have a few interesting conundrums. We have to figure out, how do we fill this space, make it look beautiful, make it feel like Colorado. These people just moved to Colorado and want to embrace everything there is about Colorado, which I was really excited to hear. So we're going to take this brand new build and try to make it look like it's been here on the prairie for years. That's our goal. This is our very first house, small front yard, partially remodeled. This homeowner, they love Colorado. They love everything about it. They love the plants, they love the evergreens, they love the shrubs, the trees, and they want their front yard to kind of give them that sense of place. They want low maintenance, they want low water, they want to increase their curb appeal. You can tell they've done a lot to this house already. The paint job, the colors they chose, the concrete work that's already been completed looks fantastic. And this homeowner is a DIYer. They want to do it themselves. So they want to be hands-on. They want to plant these plants themselves. They just need direction on where to go. Now with this house, because of the beautiful colors and lines, I did stick with some more traditional plants, but I'll talk about some potentially more naturalistic options as well when we go through this design process. But I do think this house is just stunning. So take a look at it. Remember this front house, because now I'm going to draw it and we're going to do the design in action. Here we go. So if you've come to my classes in person, at the end I always try to leave some time to do some sketching. Sketching, I feel, is the easiest way for me to convey what's inside my head in a way that people can automatically relate to it. So we're going to begin by just sketching the bones of this house. And I cheated because I have one that's colored behind it. So you'll see the final product on this one. But I'm just going to draw what that house looked like. So over to the left, we had basically a 2-car garage. So let's draw that in. We had a second story right above it. Kind of tilted back. This homeowner, as I mentioned, they did some really nice styling. So they actually have some additional trim work they did up top with some white paint. They did some extra trim work on the windows, which I really like. I love remodeling my house as well, and that's something that I like to do, is a strong, basically top and bottom to the windows, where you just use a little bit thicker of a trim piece to accent that top and bottom. So that's the left side of the house with this tall 2-story house, and then the driveway kind of slopes down over this way. There's some stairs that come down, and then we have our front curb. Now over to the right, the roof line kind of comes down, it slopes. We have another peak which supports kind of a little front porch area. And then we have the front door over here, a little bit of a roof line, some more stairs, and then we have this retaining wall. I loved that they did a solid concrete retaining wall. I think it adds a lot of just a modern touch to it, and you'll see it sets yourself up for some really great display of plants, almost like artwork in front of that wall. So here is our planting space. We really just have, and their house kind of goes this way, we really just have this kind of square here, and then this space right in front of the wall. In this space currently, they have part of it with rock and part of it with, I think, a mulch on the interior. So we're going to use that to our advantage. So here is our planting space. This is where we're able to actually fill in with plants. And for this house, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out a tree. Anytime you have a 2-story house, you want to soften the sides of it, and you also want to try to frame the front door. You can't see it in that picture, but this person's house right here, they park their vehicle right in this location. And I also want to try to screen that from sitting in that front porch area. So right away, I'm going to say, I need a tree. Now, I can't necessarily do a really large tree because this space is really probably about 15 by 15 feet wide. It's not a gigantic space that I can put in, a Colorado blue spruce. So although this person said, we love Colorado, putting a giant blue spruce right in front of their house wouldn't be a smart thing. That spruce would cover the entire right-hand side, and all it would look like is you have a tree and a garage with a bedroom up top. Instead, we want to use something that's more of an ornamental tree. We want to bring in some color, we want to bring in some form, and a great tree that's going to do that for you and still be low maintenance and low water is a crabapple. So in this instance, because of that really beautiful teal color, I wanted a tree that was going to stand up to that contrast, to that strong color, and I chose a radiant crabapple. So radiant crabapples are a wonderful tree. You can get them in single stem or multi-stem. In this instance, I'm going to go with a single stem tree. They're going to get to be about 15 feet tall and wide, and they have a really dark pink flower in the spring. It just covers the entire branches. And then the leaves come out and they're kind of a greenish maroon, and then they turn purple over the summer. So I also picked this tree because not only will the flowers stand up to that bluish color in the house, but the leaves are also going to not blend in. That purplish color is going to play off of that dark background. So this tree, you'll notice I didn't put right in the middle. You never want to put kind of your big focal, your main element in the right dead center of your yard. It's like a bullseye in the middle of your yard. When you do that, your eye is automatically drawn to the middle and you never look at anything else. Instead, you want to place this tree off to the side, almost about a third away from the edge, and about a third back from probably the front corner. And you want that to balance or frame that front door so that when you're driving down the road, your eye doesn't float off to this direction. It doesn't notice the van parked next door. Instead, it brings you right into that place where you need to go. It's directing you to the front door. So always place, in this instance, like a front yard tree, don't place it in front of your window. Don't place it directly in front of your house. Push it off to the side where it will bring your eye and make the direction feel like it's bringing you into that front door. So number one, tree here, beautiful colors standing against the dark background, and something that's going to bring kind of spring, summer, and even fall color. This tree also has a nice yellow fall color. So once I get that tree and I start to think about how busy do I want to make this area, it's really pretty small. And I can tell by the styles or the design styles and choices they made with their house that they like things kind of bold and simple. So even though they said Colorado, I want to honor that, but I also want to play off what they've done since they've done such a beautiful job on this house. So with this, I'm going to put in some boulders. Nothing says Colorado like a couple boulders in your yard. And I always find that something like next to a tree is a great place to reinforce that, hey, look at me. And it's also a great way to take up some room so you're not planting a lot of little plants to fill the space. These are something that don't need water, they don't need maintenance, they can't die on you, they're going to be there forever. So just this combination right here already is looking pretty good. But we said Colorado. And when you're doing Colorado, you've got to do some evergreens. So maybe in this front area here, we're going to put in an evergreen. Now, you'll notice I didn't just make that a little ball. I'm going to choose an evergreen that's going to fill in that front of that space and maybe even cascade over that wall a little bit. And so that evergreen could be like a Mesa Verde spruce. It could be a Hillside Creeper pine. It could be a prostrate blue spruce. It could be an alban pine. There are a lot of different options in there. I think for this one, I put in Mesa Verde in the next slides, which will show you the pictures of these plants. So now we got our boulders, we got our evergreen, we got our flowering crabapple. What else? We still have a few spaces to fill. So one plant that I love that I think is underused in Colorado is something called a Mackie daphne. It's a small rounded shrub that stays really nice and neat, but you never actually have to prune it. It's just the way it grows. So I'm going to tuck that one in right behind that tree. And the other great thing about Mackie daphnes is they have an amazing scent. So having it right off that patio will be a great way to sit there. You'll be able to smell that bloom, and it's just about to bloom. It's one of the early bloomers for us. So in early spring, when you're excited to be outside, you could sit on that front porch and you could smell that really sweet plant. Now in the background here next to the deck, this is where I would recommend doing an ornamental grass. I oftentimes tell people if you use an evergreen, some grasses, and a flowering shrub, you've got a great combination that will give you color and texture throughout the year. So this ornamental grass, I really just want to kind of fill in this space, give me some texture, give me some background. That's beautiful, but easy to maintain, reliable, and just really nice. So in here, I'm going to use what's called a Prairie Sky switchgrass. Prairie Sky switchgrass is a wonderful lower water grass that has a beautiful golden fall color. And because this is the front door, I left a gap right here. Now you could come in and put a nice perennial like Jupiter spear. Jupiter would be a great perennial to tuck right in there. It has a pink flower that would look beautiful in the middle of summer against that teal house. But you could also do my other favorite thing, which is put in some flower pots. Put in some nice bold flower pots that will stand out right there. Maybe you even choose a nice red color. You know, doing like a cranberry with that teal would be really pretty. And all of a sudden you now have this color from your pots. You've got these color and textures from your boulders. You've got the winter evergreen up front, grasses behind, this flowering tree, this low maintenance, beautiful shrub that's gonna smell amazing in spring. And you've got a really nice, simple plant combination for this small space that fills it up, is easy to maintain, only needs to be watered about once a week, maybe twice a week in the hottest part of the summer, but is a great combination. Oh, but I almost forgot. In front of this wall, remember how I said we're going to use it to make a plant stand out? In front of this wall, I want to do two things. First, I want to put in some more boulders. We're not going to put in red boulders. We need black boulders. Let me get this pen. I'm going to put in some boulders. And you'll notice that when I put in boulders, I usually like to put them in kind of groups, and I don't space them equally. Don't space your boulders like they're dashes in a row. You want your boulders to create what's called spatial tension. You want them to be different sizes, and you want some closer than others. So here we're going to put these kind of three boulders on the edges, and then we're going to come in and we're going to put some really frilly, silvery blue blade ornamental grasses in front of this wall that just kind of zing right off that dark concrete and really give you a striking texture in the front of the wall. So here's our first little combination. This is what it looks like with me just kind of quickly hand drawing it. This is what it would look like if I put some color to it. So you can see the red pots, you can see the grasses in back, the Mackie, daphne, the flowering crabapple tree. You know, these colors aren't perfect, but it really kind of shows you how the purplish, maroonish green leaves can play off of that teal house. And then our silvery grasses across the front. Here's the combination. We got the radiant crabapple, Prairie Sky switchgrass, Mackie, daphne, Hillside Creeper, pine, or Mesa Verde. Mesa Verde is the picture I have there. It's a little bit shorter, a little bit tighter, but still a wide spreading evergreen. That's super cool. You don't prune it. This is just how it looks. And then the grass in front, I put a blue avena in here because of how deep blue it is. But of all these plants, that blue avena is the one that's going to want the most water. So you could always switch it out for like a little blue stem that's also really blue, but has a maroon fall color, which is cool. So you've got some options there on plants you can play around with. You could also change out the crabapple for something like a thornless cockspur hawthorn too, if you wanted something a little bit more, native, so to speak. So above the wall, I would use a wood mulch there, and I would not use fabric. So I could tell when I got there to take the pictures that there was probably mulch on top of that fabric, and with the crazy winds we had this spring, most of it was gone. So don't use fabric when you're using wood mulch. Put it right on top of the ground. It'll stay better for you. It will still blow away a little, but you're going to get a better contact with that soil, which is going to help it stay in place. And then down below, they already had existing rock right along the edge, and I believe there was some existing wood mulch close to the wall. The grasses up front are going to be less picky, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I just like the wood mulch in the back. partially because of these plants, although all these plants grow fine in rock too. So this next slide isn't, at all the plants we used here. These are a different set of plants. But I do like this combination if you have a small area that you want a lot of color that you don't mind increased maintenance. I didn't put a lot of perennials in this front because I felt like just the boldness, the style of the house could use these big, bold plants. I didn't need a lot of little small detail things that have to be, touched in some way. These perennials on this page are lower maintenance, but you might need to touch them at least once, sometimes some of them twice a year. So this is a great combination though for good color, lower maintenance, maybe close to your patio or your front door. So just something I wanted to show as kind of an alternative to these bigger shrubs if you had a smaller space. There's a few other plants you could put with this, like Miss Kim lilac. Oh, there's our Prairie Sky switch again. Kind of love that plant. And then the last one there is a hackberry. So if you're looking for a larger front yard tree, a hackberry is a great option, and it has a beautiful yellow fall color and it's very low water. So number 2, so this is the rock ribbon house where we have a large front yard. It's kind of ready for love. It needs some new love given to it, right? So these people came, they bought this house, they're ready to renovate. They came through and ripped out a bunch of old, overgrown things that were too close to the house. So this is the right-hand side of the driveway where they had some lower, I believe they were junipers and other shrubs growing underneath this pine tree. And I wanted to show this side because I know this is really common, but my suggestion on this side, throw in a few boulders under that tree, put in wood mulch right underneath the pine tree so that way when the pine needles fall, you can just mix those pine needles right into the wood mulch. It doesn't hurt anything. And then closer to the fence, this homeowner and I talked about, what do you do with this rock that's there? And I said, well, you could clean it. You could make a screen out of 2x4s and some wire mesh and clean it and repurpose it. And in this instance, I would do just that for the area closer to the fence where you're not going to have as many pine needles fall and you still have like a utilitarian space that you have to walk in and out of that gate. So just keeping it simple. On the sides of the driveway where you're really not doing a lot, it's sometimes just the simplest method of keep it clean, keep it nice, but don't make yourself spend a lot of maintenance and a lot of time maintaining that space. So for the other side of their front yard, they wanted native. She has had bees before and is looking to get bees again, which is something that I want to do one day. She's looking for low maintenance. She's got kids, she works, she needs something that is going to be beautiful but not take all of her time. Very low water. They currently do not have an irrigation system. I still recommend that they look into getting at least a drip system because by the time you spend all this money and time investing in these plants, installing these plants, if you had to leave for 2 weeks or a period of time where it was really hot and dry and they all die on you, you just lost all that investment. So I really encourage people to go ahead and put in an irrigation system, even if you are getting really drought resistant plants. She loved cacti. She is speaking Catherine and I's language. So this one, we get to talk about a cool little area next to our driveway where maybe we'll have some cacti. And they are also DIYers. So they're looking for some projects that they can do on the weekend and to kind of get this done. This is the front yard we're going to be working on. So here's her front yard, kind of real loosely. This is when I do these sketches, I usually do them pretty fast and they're all freehand. I don't print anything out and trace it. I just go for it because it's really just an impression. It's a conceptual idea of how plants could be laid out in the space that really provides a good visual on how it's going to look. So here in this space, now this is actually facing kind of southeast-ish. It's definitely getting full sun in the morning, and then in the afternoon it's probably getting some shade. The area here is actually a corner lot as well, or our last one's a corner lot, but that has a little bit more sun down in here. So just mainly east, but maybe slightly to the south in this front area. So here's the house. Now, again, we kind of have this 2-story house, but we also have this interesting elevated entrance that we're going to want to address. We have this beautiful existing pine tree over here that we're going to want to keep. And then her and I talked about doing a cactus garden right on this front edge, kind of close to the corner of the driveway. She does want some grass. I think that's actually a great way to cover this larger space, is to use some grass. But I want to talk about maybe a more native grass blend with some perennials mixed in that kind of really lends itself to that wildlife habitat and promoting pollinators. I'll have some photos on what I'm visioning on that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and begin. Now, earlier I talked about softening the corner of the house. We kind of have that with this big evergreen, but I still want to fill in this gap, and I want to train the eye to come closer to this front door, right? We talked about how we want our plants to kind of create a flow in the direction that we want people to go or to look. So one plant I thought would be good here is the alternate leaf butterfly bush. So she is a pollinator person. So the butterfly bush is this really neat. This one is kind of is flowing, kind of cascading shrub where it's big. It's going to be, 8-12 feet wide. But it's a silvery plant with these purple flowers that kind of dangle down on the sides. So we're going to put that over in the corner to soften the edge there. I would put in some blonde ambition blue grama grasses and here across the bottom. Now, when I do a naturalistic landscape, I like to sprinkle things around. So if we're going to have some blonde ambition over here, kind of doing this thing, we're going to go ahead and bring it up front as well. So we're going to just sprinkle that blonde ambition kind of throughout the landscape, and that again helps move your eye through this space. So here we have this blonde ambition that's going to kind of flow throughout this landscape. I think the baby blue dwarf rabbitbrush is another beautiful one that's going to kind of peek in and out of those and just bring us kind of in and out of all the little nooks and crannies. And so on the last one, we took a very organized approach. In this one, we're going to go more natural. We're going to kind of spread things throughout, repeat them the way that nature would, and we're going to add a lot of interesting textures and colors. Next up, we talked about that cactus garden. So we're going to do the cactus garden in here. And what am I going to put with this cactus garden but a bunch of boulders? These boulders are a great way to, one, you could elevate the space a little bit if you wanted to. You could play with the topography in there. But also it reflects heat. So if you have these cacti, if maybe you don't quite have a super hot microclimate, you can actually intensify that microclimate by putting in some boulders. On some photos you'll see in a minute, you'll see how Catherine and I did that. Then I would come in with some prickly pear. We've got some great prickly pear. The flowers on the prickly pears, the bees just love. So I would put some prickly pear kind of right in that front entrance, and then maybe we've got some perennials across the ground like Blackfoot daisy. And maybe we have some penstemon peeking out over the top over here. So we get some really early color and flowers for the bees with this penstemon. And we're going to sprinkle the penstemon over here too, because the penstemon might kind of actually find itself inside the grass area. Now, closer to the house, again, we have some lower windows here and upper windows. I don't want to block the lower windows. So here I'm going to say like maybe that Hillside Creeper pine, because that's a really big one, a good 12-foot wide one. We're going to have it fill across that front. And then to bring in some foliage color, there's a plant called summer wine ninebark. I'm going to put a couple of those there at the base of that elevated entrance. So we can kind of hide that dead space down below. We can soften that entrance and then repeat actually the color of some of the house, because the house has some maroon brick to it. So we bring that maroon out into the foliage and the landscape. It'll be a nice way to get some color without having to just depend on flowers. Next to this, I'm also going to put in some Windwalker Royal Red Salvia. So here we have some salvia. Maybe there's another kind of boulder or two off to the side. And then in here, maybe we have some grasses. And maybe the grasses in there are something like a Indian grass, which birds love. So the seed heads on our Indian grass, the birds love to eat. So we have a taller grass in there kind of peeking out. And then all of this in between is grass. So that grass maybe can go to the front there, right onto the driveway, and then it curve around the back side of the house. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some quick color on this one so you can kind of see it come to life. So I didn't get everything colored, but you can kind of start to see the idea here. But using these plants to kind of provide color, provide interest, fill this space, give the pollinators something to enjoy, and also create some really interesting and wild native landscaping here with the prickly pear up front. So now I'm going to show you some photos of things that, this is what's in my head, but I'm going to show you photos of things that actually exist so you can see what this would look like. So these are a lot of the plants I have up there. They're not all of them, but we have that alternate leaf butterfly bush. That's that flowing purple thing up top. We have the blonde ambition blue grama. That's the grass on the left. Below that, we have the baby blue rabbitbrush, which is a tight silver ball for most of the summer. And then come late August, it explodes with yellow flowers. It's beautiful, and bees love it. Next to that is our Windwalker royal red salvia, which is a perennial, but it can be 3 or 4 feet tall. It's awesome. Very low water. We actually had it in a place here that doesn't have any supplemental irrigation and lived for a number of years. This whole landscape, you probably want to water, if you can water it once a week or so, that would be good just to keep all the plants healthy and living and growing for you. A lot of them could get by with less, but that would probably be my limitation on this group of plants. And then bottom right-hand corner is our summer wine ninebark. And so that's, you can see is, it actually has like that green that turns purple too. And then come fall, it's like this deep red burgundy. It's beautiful. So this is what I'm thinking for her grass area. This is a combination of a bunch of different grasses. We've got some switch actually grass right in here. We've got buffalo, we've got fescues, we've got blue grama, we've got saccaton, we've got all sorts of native grasses in here. And then you can see that purple plant, that's actually Rocky Mountain penstemon that just is poking itself out right in this grass. I wouldn't use any edging in this grass. I would just let that grass, or edging in this landscape, I would let that grass just creep along, get close to those plants in the perimeters. But this is what I'm thinking for this individual. And you can mow this after the penstemons bloom. You could come in and mow it so you could keep it semi-short. But I like this concept for this area because it really kind of drives home that recreation of kind of this natural space. So here's another example where it's kind of a similar concept, but on a smaller scale. So this is actually a house up in Fort Collins, and this grass in this picture is just blue grama. So you can see they have a nice little green area, and then they have a really beautiful perennial garden right next to that. That's got lots of color, lots of texture. I thought you could put a few prickly pear right in there, and they would be right at home. So that's why I thought this picture did a good job kind of relating to what the homeowner was looking for. And then here is our Salomestone Plaza. So the Salomestone Plaza actually has no irrigation to it. So there's some green thread, there's some Shangri-La sage, there's skullcap, there's a muley grass in there. There's a lot of really cool perennials. If you're looking for really low water, come check out our Salomestone section. We approach that a very different way than traditional landscaping, which I won't get into today. But it's really a beautiful landscape that has color, has texture, and does have some good plants for pollinators. So in this scene, this is our cactus garden, and go ahead and start clicking, Catherine, because it's going to go through the names of these plants. So I just wanted to show this picture because you can see the larger rocks that are mixed in between the fine gravel rock, and I would use fine gravel in this upper section with the cactus. That's what I would use in that area. But then there's things like prairie zinnias and Blackfoot daisy that would do a nice job of covering the ground next to those cacti, and partridge feather. Those are all great plants. And then you can get prickly pear that bloom in all sorts of colors and are all different shapes. So there's a lot of options out there. Cactus gardens do not just have to be cacti. They can have this much beauty to them. This is what it looks like about June in that picture. And so this is June. And as the season progresses, here we are in late August. So you can really create a cactus garden that transforms and is beautiful and is soft. It's not just this space that feels hard and thorny. It can really have a lot of beauty and interest to it. So this next photo is actually of our entrance bed. That's little Trudy catmint, some undaunted muley, and some Christophini allium in the center there. So here I just want to show how you can take just a few plants and really make a space feel beautiful and have lots of texture. You don't have to go crazy with different types of plants. You can keep it simple and still have a really nice landscape. So here's a combination of blue grama, that's the little grass on the left, and then baby blue rabbitbrush, that's a celery mound on the right. I'm just going to show a progression of what it looks like throughout the year. But this is a great combination. This is over by our pink house in the Waterwise neighborhood. Should give us what it looks like come summer. Yeah. And then come fall and winter with snow. So the reason why you want to use ornamental grasses, evergreens, and things that have some color or textures or forms is you want it to give you beauty and interest throughout the year. And those plants right there do a great job of that. So this is the brand new build. And with this one, this homeowner is a transplant. So they just moved to Colorado. And at first I thought they wanted lush green, but with less water. And I was kind of racking my head on how do I do this. But then after getting to talk to this person more in person, man, they want to embrace being here and they want to create something that's going to be just knocked down, gorgeous, supports pollinators, and just be really a showcase for their neighborhood and not just a sea of gravel. So this is the front of the house, which I have some inspirational photos for, but we're going to keep going so I can talk about more about the side. So for the front of the house, we talked about doing some stacked stone and planting plants in between the little crevices within that garden and doing a lot of insane color and texture right at that front door. This is our front entrance here at the garden. This is another picture. And really, this is just more detailed here, but there's some great plants at that front entrance. If you haven't seen it, we redid this about 3 years ago, and it's really beautiful. So this is what it actually looks like in spring. The last two are a little bit later in the year. And that's just a few of the names for you, but a lot of these you've heard already today. And then our crevice garden again. So again, just a stacked stone where you kind of fit them together. That's very Colorado, and that's kind of what you see when you go hiking, right? And as in nature, these rocks are going to kind of tumble against one another. And for its front entrance, that's kind of the concept that we want to recreate. Now this is the side of the house. So on the side, we have this really big blank area that the original design just really had a few trees and a handful of shrubs and two different colors of rock to break up the space. And he really wanted something just a lot more interesting, a lot more, just a nod to where he's moving. He doesn't want to feel like, you know, we're in Arizona. I will show you the drawing here in a bit, but I want to show you the inspirational pictures first, and then that way I can maybe answer some questions while I'm drawing. So this is from Denver Botanic Gardens, and this is one of their native walk areas. And to the right, you can see there's a mowed border. This is actually buffalo grass with a couple other grasses mixed in, like blue grama. And that first about 3 feet is mowed, and they call that a beauty band in the landscaping world. And so inside of his sidewalk next to his house, we talked about what if we kind of mow or maintain a section closer to the sidewalk and then let kind of nature take its course from there going up towards the house. So that's what's at Denver Botanic Gardens. This is what's at our garden. So this is us taking the spin on what would you find right here in Colorado Springs. And so again, you can see that more manicured lower section in the front, and then things get wild, and you've got some blonde ambition, you've got some switchgrass, you've got some undaunted muley grass in there, you've got some butterfly weed, you've got forbs, you've got perennials growing in there, you've got tall grasses in the back. But this wild kind of approach, I think, is something that people are ready for. I would rather have this than a sea of rock any day, especially when maybe I mow that front edge every few weeks or so. So for me, this type of landscape is something that is more resilient, it's more sustainable, and is much much prettier than some trees and shrubs and rocks. This is what that same landscape looks like, just from a different angle. This is about September time frame. Still beautiful. And here we are in winter, dead of winter. We still have beautiful color, we have texture. Give me this over some dead Carl Forster spaced way too far apart in the middle of some dark granite rock on the side of a big house any day. This is what I would do, hands down. But I will real quickly talk about what this homeowner came to me with and then what we talked about doing. All right, so we've got 4 minutes. I'm going to do this in those 4 minutes, and then I'll stay around and answer questions for people. But this is the side of his house. When you're pulling into his neighborhood, there's one way in, and you're pulling right in to this. So this is what the original plan was. And, you know, it's not a bad plan, but I think we can do better. I think we have the knowledge. I think we have the skills these days, but we can do something better than this. So you can see there's, 3 trees on the perimeter. There's singular boulders spaced out on the perimeter, potency on each side, a couple upright fastigiate spruces, and then small shrubs spaced across the sea of rock. So again, I don't want to knock anybody that's doing this, but I think we have a better solution. So let's go to the proposed solution. So here we are, side of the house. First things first, this is his wife's office window. We can't block that. She's a perfect view of Pikes Peak. We got to keep that open. So we're going to come in and we're going to plant some trees on either side of it. Now in here, I would go with like a Sunburst honeylocust. I would go with a tree that's going to grow big quick. He's only going to be here for a few years. Now I made those really big and I made them cover the window, but you can push them out a little farther. But this Sunburst honeylocust has a chartreuse leaf in the spring that turns to a dark green. It's really, really nice in a yellow fall color. So I'd put those on the edges. I would go ahead and do a little bit of a rock border next to the foundation because builders do not like irrigation close to the footing on the house. You got to give it some space. So there's going to be rock next to there. And then as we talked about, we're going to have some kind of awesome grasses that are filling their way through the hillside here. And then we're going to have a lower grass that's along the front. And then maybe mixed in between those, we're going to put in some shrubs, some native shrubs, like maybe there's a currant that's kind of peeking up in the back. That's a yellow curtain that has full of yellow flowers, just starting right now, and then actually some of them can get some berries on them as well. And because this is Colorado, we're going to fit in maybe an evergreen or two, and maybe we'll put in some boulders just here on this hillside just to give it some texture, because it is a slope that goes up. And he does want a fence, so there's a fence that's going to have to come over here, and that's where we'll stop that grass. And then in the parkway here, we'll do some more boulders, but we're not going to just do one that's spaced equally across the ground. We're going to do some cool rock crops, right? Because in this space, I know this person loves the idea of having those plants that are just tucked in right in between each one of those little rocks. So we're just going to have some really interesting plants kind of peek out from the side. Maybe we'll use the baby blue rabbitbrush and blonde ambition combo in here. That would look really nice, kind of repeated across this edge. And all of a sudden we have this landscape that is beautiful. It's going to be friendly to our pollinators. It's going to be friendly in terms of amount of water it's needed. It's going to be super well adapted. So this landscape is going to thrive in the future. It's not going to need, basically an artificial lifeline 3 days a week with water. And it's going to fill the space. It's not going to heat his house because of the reflecting rock. It's going to add beauty to the neighborhood. Be reminiscent of where we live and allow him to enjoy Colorado right in his own yard. Yeah, I just want to give a huge thank you to all of you. This was fun. This is the way I like to think and explain my thought process, and I also love to help customers and hopefully inspire you guys to feel like you can take on some of these types of projects yourself and push it farther where we're really trying to create landscapes here in town that are resilient and just really do a good job of supporting where we live. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time tonight. Good luck to you on your projects, and come by our garden.